So this is my second DIY project. I'm building a R2R DAC, and I'm using, and I believe the pronunciation is Soekris. It's an R2R DAC as opposed to the Delta Sigma DAC, which is a chip DAC. So I already have a chip DAC, and I wanted to do an R2R DAC because I hear the sound is better, and after building it, I believe the sound is better, or it's more to my liking. So what I have here is a series of schematics, and then I will show you the completed product. So I'd like to talk about these schematics and what they're doing and how I did my testing and things to watch out for. First thing I have here is the power supply, and the thing to note here is that the transformer that I'm using, I had to connect it in parallel, which gave me 18 volts AC across the outputs. At first I hooked it up in series, and that didn't work because I only got 9 volts right here, 9 volts AC, and I needed 18. So parallel on this side, and then on the other side I hooked them in series so I could get my negative and positive voltage, with the center tap being the isolated ground. And then the outputs of this guy go to a full wave rectifying bridge, and then a bunch of capacitance, and that gives me, these are RMS values, so by the time you're through the capacitors, you're at 12 volts. So I was at minus 12 and plus 12 on the outputs. I ran one of the plus 12 outputs to an adjustable regulator, and so this guy pumps out around a little over 5 volts, and I'm using that to power the Raspberry Pi. And so I did this in stages. First of all, if you aren't comfortable or you've never dealt with power, I would suggest you just go out and buy yourself a power supply that'll work with a Soekris board. I don't know how much they cost, but I'm sure you can buy a linear power supply. And so the outputs, you're only dealing with plus minus 9, 10, 11, 12 volts, whatever it is you decide on. And there's less chance of a mishap with injuring yourself or killing yourself, because at this end the voltage is straight out of the wall, so you don't want to play around with that. If you're not comfortable or you've never done it, I would suggest just buying a power supply. And so regulators are pretty simple, so I went ahead and I put him on a heatsink, and then I've got 5 volts out that goes to a Raspberry Pi. And additionally, with this particular circuit, I went ahead and all I did was I hooked up the transformer, measured voltage, and once I was satisfied I got the right voltage, then I ran it through the bridge and measured the voltage there without connecting up all the capacitance. Then I hooked up all the capacitance, made sure I got the voltage I wanted there, and then also verified what was coming out of the regulator too. So I got the whole power supply working properly. I was comfortable with the way it was working, and so then I moved on. And the next part's very low power stuff. It's simpler than dealing with power. I think it's simpler. Basically, I got to have a Raspberry Pi, which is my streamer, and then I have the Soekris board, which is the D to A converter. And these are all this is the pin out for the Raspberry Pi. I'm using the GPIO connector. What I'm doing is going directly from the I2S bus on the Raspberry Pi to the Soekris board. So these are all the pin outs for Raspberry Pi to Soekris. And this is the J3 connector on the Soekris board. And I use power for my regulator. So that goes to pin 2, and then pin 6 is ground. And so ground on this side is this isolated ground, which is this guy right here. Okay, so this covers the Raspberry Pi. And then here's the Soekris side of things. So on Soekris we've got power in. He said you can either go with DC or AC. So I'm going with a DC power plus minus 12 volts. And then these are the connectors that I had on the other page. This is a J3 connector. And this is what comes in. You got bit clock, left, right, data in. 2 different grounds, and then my 3.3 volts. So this is, again, I2S, which is in the manual in the Soekris document. And then these are my outputs. I went ahead and I hooked up the RCA outputs. I'm not using the balanced outputs because I don't really have any balanced gear yet. So if I ever get some, then I'll go ahead and use those, use the balanced output. But right now the RCA works fine, and I've been listening to it using a headphone amp and the RCA connectors, and I'm pleased with the sound is great. I really enjoyed it. I went down to Goodwill, which is basically a thrift store, in case you don't know what Goodwill is. And at the thrift store, I bought this. This was a Yamaha DVD, one of those 5-disc players. And I don't know if it was working or not. It was only $20, so I just took all the guts out and used the case. So I'm going to put a wooden panel on the front here just to kind of dress it up a little bit. Everything else fits just fine. Okay, so this is the almost completed Streamer / DAC. And so what I did was I got extra beefy components just because it didn't really cost much more, and I thought I would, I'm trying to zoom in on the transformer here so that people can see what this is. So I've ordered all this stuff from DigiKey. So the transformer, these connectors I actually ordered from Amazon, and then the caps are all ordered from DigiKey, and I had a fuse sitting around, I had a heatsink sitting around. So anyway, various places, I got various things. So this regulator right here, that was fairly hard to find because the Pi says it needs a 3 amp power supply, and 1.5 amp regulators are a dime a dozen, but anything over that's a little more difficult to find. So this one was pretty much overkill at 7.5 amps, and it runs a little hot, but it should be fine for powering up the Pi. So basically what we have here is power coming in. So it goes to a fuse and then a switch over here. And there's the full wave rectifier from the transformer. And let me zoom out a little bit. Okay. And so all this stuff is just for the power supply. And then over here we've got the Raspberry Pi with all my music, CDs that I've recorded lossless on a 250 gig thumb drive. And I'm also using it, Apple AirPlay, as a streamer for, I'm paying for the Amazon Music, the lossless format that they've got. High def, I think they call it. This is the Soekris board, which I've covered in the other schematic, and you can see what I've done is I've wired the little connectors that go over the pins. I've wired those up and crimped them on, and then put a little heat shrink over it. This is not the best way to do things. I'd suggest you get a connector and do things the right way, but this is working for now. I may eventually get connectors for all this stuff. It's just to put a little less stress on the pins. That's the power coming in. And here's what comes out, RCA. RCA jacks, and that's power straight from the board. Or not power, but audio straight from the board. And right now I'm running this with some AudioQuest cables. Believe it or not, I found quite a difference in cables. I had several different versions of cables, and these I'd bought years ago, and I could definitely hear a difference. It was, I mean, a cleaner sound, a little, anyway, you know, all those audiophile terms that I don't like to use. But anyway, it goes through a I think this is a Valley, yep, headphone, amp, and then I've got some IEMs that I'm listening to, and there was quite a difference between this and I've got I think it's a Modi 2, whatever shit's DAC is, that's only $100. I upgraded that with a better power supply that costs $100, and so it sounded quite a bit better, but it can't, it does not sound as good as my new one. Now I've got a factor of I built this, so maybe I'm biased. So maybe after a year or so of listening to this and the newness and the gee, I did a great job kind of thing, maybe that'll wear off and I'll find some flaws with it. But right now it sounds really great. I'm really happy with the sound quality. And just to use a few of those audiophile terms, there is more. It's more detail. There's more separation. The bass is really, really good. I was surprised at that. Actually, I wasn't expecting that at all because I thought I already had pretty good bass, but it improved quite a bit with this stack. And the mid-range seemed not as forward as it is with the Delta Sigma DAC. It seems a little pushed back, and I don't know if that's the style of DAC or if that has anything to do with there's a little digital filtering going on inside this. There's an FPGA on here. And so I haven't updated. As you can see, I didn't even install the serial port. So I haven't done anything with the software that he's provided. I thought, well, I'll just try it and see if I like it. Then there's no reason to do anything to it. So far I like it, so I have no reason to do anything like upgrade the software, or the firmware, I should say. And anyway, about the mid-range being a little bit not as up front in your face. So what I ended up doing, I just turned the volume up a little bit, and then it seems like it's in perfect proportion with everything else once I turn the volume up just a little bit. So that may be a personal taste kind of thing. If you want mid-range, like in your face, then maybe this isn't the right DAC for you, or could be my electronics, my amp. I don't know. Anyway. But I was real happy with it. I like the cleanness of the sound and all the other things that came along with it. So if you've got questions about building this, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I like responding to questions that people ask, and usually I don't get very many hits on my videos, so I don't think it'll be a problem answering questions. So best of luck if you decide to do this.